Democrat on the House Education and Workforce Committee, recently asked the Government Accountability Office to study poverty and race in K-12 schools, and that report found that economic and racial segregation is on the rise some 62 years after the Brown v. Board of Education decision. So, Congressman Scott, how is it possible in 2016 that our schools are becoming more separate, less equal?
Well, we asked for the report actually 2 years ago. Ranking Member George Miller of Education and Workforce and John Conyers, who's the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, and I asked for the GAO to study segregation in schools, because a lot of reports were coming out, a lot of researchers were claiming that the level of segregation was unacceptably high and growing. And that's exactly what the GAO found, that a significant number of jurisdictions have excessive racial isolation. It also overlaps with class, just not only racial but also low income. And when you combine the two, trying to educate people in low income, racially isolated situations, the studies show that the results aren't as good as when you have racially integrated schools. And the isolated schools, the services aren't as good. You have less access to more rigorous academic courses. You have the libraries. I mean, the facilities are not as good. I mean, the same kinds of problems we had in 1954 are coming back. And then the disturbing thing was that the resegregation was not only much higher than acceptable, but also growing. In the last 15 years, it's grown significantly. And that's one of the disturbing things. And so we've asked the Department of Education to be more rigorous. We've introduced legislation to give a private right of action when schools are segregated. I mean, that's illegal. But you have to bring a lawsuit to do something about it.
And I want to get into some of that legislation you proposed to solve this issue, but also invite our viewers to call in. So we're doing our lines a little bit differently in this segment. A line for parents, 202-748-8000, educators, 202-748-8001, and then all others, 202-748-8002. We're talking about this report from the GAO. Here's the top line findings from the report so our viewers can see it from the Government Accountability Office. The percentage of K-12 public schools in the United States with students who are poor and are mostly black or Hispanic is growing. From school years 2000 to 2001 to 2013 to 14, the percentage of all K-12 schools that had high percentages of poor and black or Hispanic students grew from 9 to 16%. 75 to 100% of the students were black or Hispanic at these schools and eligible for free or reduced lunch, which is a commonly used indicator of poverty. These schools offered disproportionately fewer math, science, and college prep courses and had disproportionately higher rates who were held back in 9th grade, suspended, or expelled. So this economic disparity, this racial disparity, is it deliberate, or is it a consequence of circumstances over time?
Well, whether it's deliberate or not, it's a fact. And so rather than get in whose fault it is, we need to do something about it. As you've indicated, the coursework and the materials, the suspensions are higher in these schools. That gets into the school-to-prison pipeline problem, where you start with suspensions, people get behind in school, start dropping out, and dropping out is a pathway to other problems.
But to do something about it, you have to find out the cause of this. So what has been the main cause? Has it been a failure on the local level and the school boards? Is it something that the federal government has taken their eye off the ball on?
Well, again, I don't know. Do you need to go through whose fault it is? We have a problem. Let's solve it. The courts have certainly made it a little more difficult. Some school systems have had for programs to help promote racial integration that have been found unconstitutional. So some of the positive efforts along these lines have been stopped by the courts. That's in stark contrast to the earlier litigation where you're trying to integrate the schools. When some have tried to integrate the schools, the courts have stopped them. That's been one of the problems. But we've asked the Department of Education to be more vigilant. There are a lot of cases pending, desegregation cases pending, some for decades, and we just need to make sure that there's more vigorous oversight. There's we're also reestablishing a private right of action. If you see segregation, unless you can show intent, which is obviously a problem, you can have a racially neutral program that has racially polarizing effects. You want to be able to bring these cases on a local level and not wait for the Department of Education. You've got 15,000 school systems around the country, and obviously the Department of Education can't be in each and every one all the time. If the parents have a private right of action, if the civil rights group can come in and help them finance a lawsuit, that ought to be allowed, and that's in the legislation.
And that's not allowed right now?
You have to show intentional discrimination. Disparate impact, you do not have that private right of action.
We're talking with Congressman Bobby Scott, Democrat of Virginia, top Democrat on the Education and Workforce Committee. As we go through this GAO report talking about segregation in schools in K through 12, we want to hear your stories, want to hear what's happening in your schools. We have lines for parents, educators, and all others. We'll put those numbers on the screen, but we'll start with Mary in Alma, Michigan, who's a parent. Mary, good morning. You're on with Congressman Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I'm from the Detroit area, and the Detroit schools, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of books and computers never reach the children because of corruption, mostly the computers for technology. And it's so corrupt and so heavy in the administration of the education that nothing trickled down to the kids. Now, he says it's not important, the causes, but it is important because it's going to continue if it's not fixed. And it's also the teachers' unions where they can't fire anyone. So I don't know, it's such a corrupt system from top to bottom that you have to look at the cause.
Okay, well, as you suggested, money is not the only problem. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which we reauthorized, fixed the problems, and No Child Left Behind. With the new bill, the Every Student Succeeds Act, makes sure that we focus money into low-income areas. But just the money, as you have suggested, will not solve all the problems. We need to make sure that the money gets there. And if you have problems like that and have specific cases of identifiable corruption, the Department of Education needs to be informed, whatever evidence you have.
Two charts to show our viewers from the GAO report. This dark blue line here at the bottom is the number of high poverty and 75 to 100% black or Hispanic schools. That's the line along the bottom. That's gone from 9% of all schools to 16% over the years from 2000 to 2014. This bar right here, the line and dot bar, is low poverty and 0 to 25% black or Hispanic schools. You can see that number dropping from 31% to 16% to show what's happening in those schools, the difference between schools of those two types. Here's a chart that talks about schools' programs that they offer specifically on math, the number of schools in those two categories and the types of math programs they offer. For those low poverty, 0 to 25% black or Hispanic schools, you can see that 7th or 8th grade algebra is offered in 79% of schools. That compares with the high poverty, 75 to 100% black or Hispanic schools, where 7th or 8th grade algebra is offered in just 49%. It goes through algebra 2, geometry, and calculus. You can see the percentage of schools in that latter category, the high poverty, 75 to 100% black or Hispanic schools, offer a lot less of those classes between those charts. Just some of the findings from the GAO report that Congressman Scott requested. We're going over it this morning. Is in Cary, North Carolina.
Well, let me make a comment.
Sure.
If Elizabeth, you'll just hold for a second. The problem that you have in some of those when you don't have the higher academic programs, it makes it hard if you get into selective colleges. I know in California they had the problem where low-income students didn't have access to AP courses. In University of California at Berkeley, you needed more than a 4.0 average. If you get straight A's in the regular courses, that's not enough. You have to get straight A's and some advanced courses to get your GPA above 4.0. If you're in a low-poverty school without access to those, you can't get into the more selective schools. So access to those courses is not only good generally academically, but it restricts your ability to get into